Hi, everyone. I'm going to go through a couple of the questions that you have submitted to me. A few weeks ago, I had asked if you had any behavioral questions or dog training questions to please submit to me for review and for myself to go through them. So I'm going to do that right now. I wanted to start. There's actually a few questions. Some came in about aggression, some came in about reactivity. A few, actually more than I thought, came in about dog grooming, canine health. I had others regarding communication and leadership and confidence and self-esteem building. Um, the context or the type of dogs that the questions were asked about were typically very nervous dogs, fearful dogs, reactive, and aggressive dogs. So, before I start, I want to say that all behavior is interconnected. There is more than meets the eye when dealing with behavior. And when you are asking your questions, the more specific you can get or the more detail that you can give me provides me with more context to work with so that I can give more of a specific answer. In general, I don't typically just give one direct answer because it's not quite like that. It is a little black and white, and things are nuancy and things are always changing and they're dynamic. So while there are static facts about certain like temperaments or behaviors, I want you to know the dog isn't necessarily one thing. So like a reactive dog can be also a dog that it can aggress in certain contexts. Reactive dog can also be a very nervous and fearful dog. And a reactive dog can be a very insecure dog as well as a very aggressive dog. So it's not always one thing. But this is more of a conversation to get into for like personality and temperament because a personality can change depending on context from the environment or what is asked of that dog or person at that time. So let's get into it. Dog grooming. How can I help a nervous dog learn to accept nail trims? I kind of Googled at this question, and I'll tell you why. You might not have a dog that learns to accept something. So if it's not receiving the information that you're giving it, I would look into why. And I'm presuming that this is a nervous dog that doesn't like to be in the unknown. The unknown is unsettling. And once something is known, it brings ease to the dog. But when they're in the unknown, and it's new and they haven't experienced it before, there's no prior knowledge base for that dog to pull from to provide any sense of security or understanding to provide security in that moment. So let's say this is a rescue dog that you just bring home. Um, it's nervous and its nails are super long and you want to trim it. If they don't have experience, which in this context, we're assuming that they don't, how can you help them? So, one thing that I'm going to do is, and that I tell my clients to do when I get a new dog in, is less is more. Don't go in with the expectation that you're just going to clip all their nails. Like that's, you're going from zero to the Olympics without even practicing any trials for it. So what I like to tell my clients is to break nail trim, the whole thing, down into very small micro steps. Now, each micro step is going to lead into trimming their nails. There's a lot that goes into this. How you approach your dog with the nail trim and the intention that you're approaching. If you have a very nervous dog, and in this example that you just rescued, trimming their nails isn't something I'm even going to do in the first couple weeks. I won't touch it because I want to work on more of the relationship and gaining understanding and trust in my movement and my being and my presence before I start to put that dog in any situation that's going to be uncomfortable and scary and new. So this dog, given doesn't understand or hasn't had the experience with this before. So you need to be a trustworthy source to go into the unknown with them and lead them through it. Not only is it something that's new, it's also going to, so there's a psychological pressure. You're also going to be providing a physical pressure on their nail, especially if you're using the traditional nail clippers. I use the Dremel. I also like to kind of use both. What reason being is that your clippers are going to crush the nail. So I don't like to crush it. It can cause like splinters all the way through and crack the nail. But what I will do is on certain angles, I might trim it just a little bit before I get the Dremel out. But I'm not doing the entire pressure in the entire nail. It's just like trimming little bits around it. So with that said, no matter what you're utilizing, you want to be able to get the tool around them and comfortable. So for instance, if your dog isn't already comfortable with you holding their paw, that's going to be really hard to then clip their nail, because if you can't hold their paw or they're uncomfortable with the resistance of that and they're resisting you, then you're not going to be able to get a very firm grip where you can just trim their nail and they're not going to try to react or pull their paw back. I've seen too many times where dogs do that and then the owner clips them. It's the where you're gonna, it's like the highest risk to quick. And the quick means you're just gonna quick them underneath their nail and their soft tissue, and you're actually gonna cause bleeding. So to avoid that and avoid the traumatic experience for your dog when you do that, because of course if you do that once, they're gonna be less likely to have you come around again with that tool. So try to avoid quicking. If you do quick, grab flour. That is like the easiest thing. If you just got flour in your kitchen, I would grab some of that. Nitrate sticks you can do too, but that's going to be that stings. We use those a lot at the vet, just for convenience. But if you're at home, just grab some flour and just put some flour on that nail, and it will coagulate, so it will all stick together and clump. Okay, going back to how you're going to get them comfortable. As I mentioned earlier about the micro steps, I would like you to start with practicing handling your dog. So that's step one. If you can't handle your dog, then you're not going to be able to trim one of their nails. So first, practice with their paws. Something that's told to pet owners, or like right when they get home, is like new pet owners with puppies, is like practice touching their paws, look in their ears, all these things. You do want to, but don't do too much that you just piss your dog off. I make sure that those times are intentional when I'm checking them out. I'm nice and slow about it, and it's very nonchalant. I don't make a very big deal about it. And then I let the puppy go and do what they want, and then they come back, and I might do it a couple times a day, but I'm not doing it all the time with this like very rushed energy about it. And what I'm doing is I'm priming the behavior to the point where in a couple weeks, I can then pick their paw up, and then depending what they're doing, I'll be able to clip their nail. And what I mean by that is this progresses at the stage of the dog. So while there's a protocol of taking it into the micro steps, it depends where the dog is and how far I'm going to push them, and knowing when not to push them past their edge. So practice the behavior, picking up the paw, even picking up your dog. Practice one nail at a time. When your dog is comfortable with you picking up their paw, practice one nail at a time. And perhaps your goal is going to be just doing one paw a day over the course of a week, let's say. You can give your dog an intermittent time. Depends again how nervous they are or how they're acquiescing to it, but you can do one paw, day off, another paw. I like to do it so that it's little bits over time, and this is going to just help them become more familiar with the exercise and the practice of holding their paw, and then practice clipping it. I hope that helps. So we're going to go into dogs' confidence in their abilities to accomplish new things, have successes, and have new experiences. So all of those things are confidence building. So I'd have you do all of them. Okay, we're moving on. How to keep the dog calm and submissive when going to the vet. There is not one protocol here that's going to be suited for every single dog in every single case. And I will give an example of my personal dog, Maverick. My experience working at the vet, the dogs go through a series of handling. And depending on your dog's experience and when they start to work themselves up, for some people, it's right at the front door, before they even make it to reception, get handed off to the vet tech and into the back to then be handed into the, like either the kennel room to wait, um, or another vet tech or the vet. Whenever your dog starts to show that they're uncomfortable, that is what I would start like looking at. So it will just give more information, to better answer this question of like what's stressing them out, at what point do they get stressed out, and there's many things that you can do outside the vet to help. I saw some, like what I'll say is that there's some people that see a very nervous dog and they start to take their time, they start to slow down. Um, they approach differently. They'll turn their back to approach. They won't make eye contact. Now, in the setting of a vet's office, that we never had a lot of time in the back. Things were very business, rush, rush, rush. It's like one dog after the other, and emergencies coming through in the day. So it's very much a hustle mentality. Dogs need to come in, but dogs need to come out. And that protocol and just that in itself doesn't set a lot of dogs up for success, and especially your nervous and anxious dogs. Those are the ones that are going to react, very quickly. So in that situation, what I would say is that based on your dog, there are certain things you can do. Like I mentioned with the nail trim, you can practice with your dog, practice what they're going to go in to have done to them. When your dog goes in, they do a physical examination. Usually there's a very gentle hold. Practice the gentle hold at home, practice the nail trims at home, practice going out around new people. But when I say practice these things, I also want you to take that with a grain of salt, that if you have like a really nervous dog that's just always going to be anxious in those situations, don't overdo it and continuously practice something that's going to make them anxious. Less is more, small exposure over time. Use your common sense. Depends on the dog that you're working with. And truly the one that is in front of you, not the ones that have been there in front of you before, but the ones that are in front of you now, and start to adjust to their pace. And I'll give you an example. My personal dog, Maverick, had been in and out of the vet since he was a young puppy up to the age of like 1, to the point that it was every single weekend. There was a stint of time that he was in all the vets pretty much across Vancouver Island, sometimes all the way up to like Ladysmith and Nanaimo, primarily at our own. um, but why I say this is that he was in so often, and every time that he was in, he wasn't in, just for like your casual check-in or your checkup. When he was going in, he was having procedures done, and they were negative experiences. He was good at first, but of course, the more exposure and experience he got with that, the more reactive, the quicker in reactions he became, and the more his actions and behaviors intensified. It got to the point that we stopped having traditional vet visits. What I had is I worked with the vet. So upon my own training, my own knowledge and education, I started to ask the vet and tell the vet really what protocols would be better for him. So one of the protocols was we met outside. I waited in the car, and this was before COVID and before that became even a protocol. I'd wait in the car, I would be called. When I was called, I would go outside onto the grassy area that was very open. And that's where we would start to have our check-ins. That's where we started to do at the time, like our blood work. And we completely skipped the entire process of going into the vet's office, which was like its little narrow pathway into your reception room with other dogs there. Again, handling or trading off hands and going into your own little room where they did end up trading off hands. So I avoided all of that commotion because all of that caused a level of stress for Maverick that by the time he got to the vet, he was already primal mode, like get away from me. He also learned that aggressive behaviors would get others away from him. And that would be an example of fear reactivity or fear aggression. It was coming from a place of fear, but the behaviors that he chose to do was to aggress towards what he was scared of. The vet being one of them when he's sticking needles in them. So that would be an example of a protocol I follow. There's other protocols that go along with that, depending on if he needs to be sedated, the time that he gets sedated, and of course, me being in the room when he gets up. And those protocols are put into place because of incidents that have happened in the past where no one was there and he woke up and did aggress to those that he was waking up to. So when we have dogs that have prior experiences that are negative, those things are ingrained into their survival and into their actions to help them set them up with a protocol that's going to set them up for the most success, that's going to provide everyone else with safety, your own dog with safety, decrease risk, and then also increase comfort for the dog. Maverick had just gone in for surgery or dental surgery months ago, and ended up being best case scenario when he got under. They just had to do some cleanings and put on some sealants on fractures. But why I bring this up is that because I have the protocol I have now, I described that to the surgeon, and that's what we ended up doing. Is I was there for the moment that he was taken under. I was there the moment that that was pulled out and he was able to come to. So there wasn't a lot of period where he was on his own and in the unknown and scared. So those are just a few examples, but you're gonna have to do what works for you. But do get your vet on board, keep them informed. If you are an owner of a reactive or aggressive dog, let them, or fearful or nervous, whatever it be, set your vet up for success or your surgeon up for success as well. Work with the office, let them know that this is the type of dog you have, and let them know what the protocols you have in place and see what you can work together to achieve. If you go in very open-minded, then people have been really receptive of that and willing to work towards that as well. So that's something that you can do to help them. The other thing is you can help keep them out of the vet. Of course, there's always going to be a time that if medical care is needed, but most often than not, a lot of the vet visits that people go towards or go to can actually be avoided. So keep that in mind. Okay, how to get a reactive dog to stop reacting. First, I would identify the reason for the reaction. I would also observe the dog to better learn the personality and observe the environment so you have a better understanding of the context and how it changes and what certain behaviors are elicited at what changes. That's going to give you more information to work with to then help identify how to better support that dog. Another aspect to this is review what the dog is eating. An example would be like a grain diet to a dog that has a lot of allergies. The grain can become is a stomach irritant that can be at the level of the gut, upsetting the digestive system, which is then manifesting as a behavior symptom. So that is that's another area to look at is your nutrition. I have a question here, leash reactivity question mark. Not sure what the question is regarding leash reactivity. If it is just your dog reacting on leash, then that's going to go back to that prior question of start to learn to identify their triggers. I'm just throwing this out as like a scenario I see a lot, but if it's a reaction at dogs or people, it'd be something to identify. Is it dog reactive? Is it people reactive? Is it reactive just to seeing the leash? First identify those and then look at proximity and look at your routines. Look at the moments leading up into the walk before you go outside. What do those look like? I would also look at what's the relationship dynamic within the house from dog to human. I would also look at the routine of what does the day-to-day look like? Because all these little micro and mini moments leading up to what you see as reactivity or what you're deeming as reactivity could absolutely be influencing that behavior. So again, if they have a more specific question about reactivity, perhaps I can better help you, but that would be a good starting place. Protection, aggression. So I read this question and I think of the different types of aggression. I think of personality and temperament. Is the dog truly an aggressive dog, or does the dog aggress in certain moments, times, situations? Because those are two different things. If you have a dog, like Maverick would be a dog that aggresses in certain contexts, but he's not an aggressive dog. He doesn't have an intent. He doesn't just wake up with an intent to like lock eyes on a target and eliminate it. But going back to those examples I gave at the vet, when he's under a certain amount of stress, he's scared, he doesn't know what's going on, he will aggress. So that's something that I know and I'm able to manage given the protocol when we go to the vet. And that's just one like very specific example. So when it comes to protection aggression, we're talking more now about very high caliber working canines. Let's look at law enforcement, protection dogs. Those dogs have undergone extensive training. They've gone through extensive evaluation. Um, there's certain requirements that that dog needs in order to be deemed even qualified to do this at that job. So when we're dealing with protection dogs, they aggress on command, but they don't just aggress. I get asked this question when it comes to like resource guarding people or a perception that people's dogs are protecting them. I'll say 9 out of 10, well, actually 10 out of 10 times that I've been asked, the dog is not protecting the human in the way the human thinks. This is not to say that perhaps the dog wouldn't do that in different contexts. Like it comes down to relationship and situation. What I say is that a lot of times people think their dog's protecting them, but they're just guarding them because the dog perceives that human as a means to its own end, as a means to get food, as a means to have freedom of space, a means to get outside, a means to have shelter. That human being is a portal to that dog, and that's all the dog sees that human as. So in terms or in times of a threat, that dog might aggress outwardly to guard that human, and eliminate the chances that that human will be taken away from them. Because if so, then that dog's left without that portal or that gateway to those resources. But it's not the same intent as like a self-sacrifice to protect a human. I've seen it happen. It absolutely can happen, but I'm specifically asked this question typically when dogs are not we're not trained to do that. So again, I would like to know more detail about like what about protection do you want to know? Is it in context of protecting you as a human? Other members of the family? There's a little bit more to know, but I do say that there is a difference, a huge difference between a professional protection dog and a dog that is human aggressive. Okay, we have how to keep the dog calm, submissive when going to the vet. Not all dogs are submissive in all contexts, especially at the vet, and not all dogs are calm, especially at the vet. So I would say practicing calmer behavior and working on what you're practicing for the vet. If it's just handling, practice handling. You want to practice what they're going to experience. But if you don't practice it until they experience it, they're going to have a negative reaction because it's the first time they're going to come into contacts with that. And they're not going to, if they don't have prior knowledge of how to handle those situations, then they typically don't choose great answers. I had a colleague at the vet clinic I worked at, pinned up against the wall because a human aggressive dog came in. And I remember he was even muzzled, but I distinctly remember seeing that dog enter the clinic, and I just saw every step it went through to when it got to the back. And when it got to the back, with all good intentions, the staff were trying to, make eye contact, get the dog to sit, have treats. And I could just see this dog loading and loading and loading. And it eventually had my colleague up against the wall in one of the examination rooms. So that's when I came in to help her out. But yeah, that would be an example of, again, like, don't just think that vets know vet behavior. Don't just think that people that work at animal clinics, or vet offices, vet techs, reception just automatically know how to read your dog. Overall, a lot of dogs are pretty good and pretty tolerant. They don't always accept something, but they're pretty tolerant of human nonsense. And that gives everybody a good rep, but then that also leads into like this misunderstanding that all dogs are going to be able to handle that same amount of pressure. And it's just not true, especially the ones that are aggressive or nervous and fearful. They really crumble under that expectation. Okay. I had a question about natural remedies. I'm not certain what natural remedies that you're asking about, so please do let me know if you're watching this. Things that I was thinking of a brainstorm of, like tick and flea. Dr. Karen Karen Becker. I say De Becker because of Gavin, but Karen Becker, if you go under Forever Dog, there is, you could probably even Google it too, but tick and flea remedy natural spray. There's like a vinegar spray that you can do, and she has it in her book. I'll go after this and find it, and then I'll post it underneath the video, or I'll put it on my blog with a link, whatever is easier to access. I'll find out after this. Okay, going down. I have trimming, so I'm not reinforcing the wrong thing. So this falls under grooming, canine health again. I'm assuming nail trimming. So I would love to know, what about trimming? Is it the tools to use? I use the Dremel. The thing about a Dremel is that if your dog doesn't sit for you to do the classic conditional or traditional nail trim, they're not gonna be able to tolerate the stress of like the sound of that grinder. So small steps. What I find interesting is, so that you're not reinforcing the wrong things. I think it's fabulous that you're asking questions about this so that you can do it right. All this is, there are wrong ways to cut a nail. One wrong way, I would say, isn't surprisingly, it's not the direction of it. It's more of like the intention. I'd say the wrong way would be rushing the entire process, putting a dog underneath severe amounts of stress, and then expecting it to comply, be submissive, or somehow accept the process. So those were some words that I'm reading here, submissive, accept. Make sure that your expectations aren't too high for a dog, and that you're not putting them in a situation that they're not prepped for or that they can't handle. If you go nice and slow and you take the protocol that I talked about earlier with nail trims, then you're gonna be a breeze. The brain works also better. It learns better through small intermittent intervals over time. So if you just do a little bit of exposure each day, that's going to go way further than you just putting a dog under stress. And when we talk about learning, I'll be chatting about this in a different video. It's different parts of the brain that are involved with learning than when the dog is experiencing fear. If the dog is experiencing fear and they're in resistance, they're in the very primal part of their brain, and then no learning can take place there. And why I say that is that if you do push unintentionally your dog over their edge is like their capacity of what they can handle. If you push them over that, they're going to go into their instinctual response. And when we're dealing with instinct, we're no longer dealing with a learning dog. Because if we think about survival, there's no energy that goes into learning a new thing when they're seeking safety or their basic primary need, physiological need is not met. That's the only thing that's important before the dog can relax and then come back online. And when I say online, I mean that prefrontal cortex, that this part of the brain working, the forebrain. That just flipped my mind. I was thinking hindbrain, but the forebrain, prefrontal cortex, that's involved. Those compartments are involved in thinking. And when the dog is scared, the dog isn't thinking. So just think to yourself, an open mind is a safe mind. So if the dog feels safe, they're open-minded, they can learn. And if the dog does not feel safe and they're in fear, they are closed-minded. So they're not open to learning. Disordered behavior, OCD. I love going into different types of disordered behaviors because I think they are fascinating. And they are. I'm not going to do a deep dive into it, but what I'll say is that compulsive behaviors, they don't start as compulsive behaviors. They just start as a behavior that alleviates tension in the moment and then becomes compulsive over time because that's the answer the dog chose. The best way I have canine compulsive, not light shadows, reflection specific. So that's great. With any type of OCD, you just want to interrupt the behavior. There are the patterns of thought or the neuronal patterns that aren't even conscious. Those are hardwired and programmed into the dog. So right as, let's say a dog that chases their tail, right as the dog goes to chase their tail, that needs to be interrupted. And the human just needs to interrupt it at every moment that they can to break that pattern and help the dog learn a new pattern. And the moment you break the pattern, the dog does have to think, what is a different answer? But when we're dealing with OCD, we're dealing with like automatic involuntary behaviors over time. Of course, they don't start as involuntary, they're voluntary, but they become involuntary over time as the pattern is repeated. So in order to help that dog, you need to break that pattern. I've got pain as a source of adult sudden onset. Resource guarding. Okay, this is very interesting. This is very adult sudden onset sounds like a human disease that has come on in adolescence or senior adult development. Okay. Not everything that our dogs go through needs to be written in the diagnostic statistic manual, the manual for psychological disorders and behavior. I'm kind of giggling here. Resource guarding never just comes on. And what I mean by that is that there's micro things that elicit. Like I read this question and the person who is asking me is almost asking me like, oh, like what do I do when the dog has adult sudden onset resource guarding? You're not dealing with a certain time frame of resource guarding. You're dealing with resource guarding and they're just an adult. Adult is asked here, so I would ask, like, has there been any changes in this adult life? Did you just get a new puppy and all of a sudden your dog's now becoming, second dog in the house and it's becoming a little bit more protective and territorial over its food because it's never experienced having to share with another dog before? Does your dog have a chronic, maybe like an injury that has happened that's causing him to be more concerned around objects of his concern, such as food? Would be another question. There's not like a gene that's just going to turn on when the dog turns into an adult that's going to make it aggressive. But depending on how the environment has changed around them, that could be a contributing factor into why they are showing that. But I would need to know a bit more. And it says pain as a source. So I'm curious, has pain resulted because of resource guarding? Or are you, because if you're suspecting that there's pain could be one of those factors I was talking about that's contributing into an aggressive like behavior that's just showing itself more over food. A lot of things to kind of pick apart in that. But I would be curious if this is your question, please reach out to me personally. If you provide more detail, then I can provide more information. But I'm hoping from what I'm providing, you can take from that to answer here. I would look at those factors of if what has changed, if he is in pain, identifying the pain and getting, of course, that diagnosed and resolved. And then setting some safe parameters and boundaries up around food. I would also look at the pack dynamics in the house. And this isn't just dog to dog, but also dog to human and human to dog. I have a question about a herding dog living and coexisting with a cat. Okay. That sounds like chaos, but it can also be done. My question here was, when was the cat introduced? Was the cat existing before the dog was brought in? Was the dog existing before the cat was brought in? I have never seen like a dog do, like especially one with prey drive or a herding breed, do well living with any interspecies without having pre-exposure with them at like a young age. If they're very young, if the puppy is young, and the cat is young, then that's a much easier combination to put together. They don't have prior experience, and they don't have enough time to be more instinctual and build up those drives. So if they're puppies, that's going to go way better together. That would be my question. When did the puppy come in? And my example is that Maverick, he is 7 years old. Happy belated birthday, Maverick. He's 7 years old. If I brought in a kitten to this house, he would absolutely try to eliminate and kill it. If he was a little puppy and I brought a little kitten in, he'd probably like try to play and maybe chase it a bit, but he would be more malleable for me to come in and be like, that's not what we do with the cat. At this point in the game, it would just be strict management. I have lived with cats with Maverick in the past, and that's what it was. We just had a mutual agreement. You don't go after the cats. But if I wasn't there to instill that agreement, he would go after the cats. I have what breed of dog, how old, and when was it introduced? Because those are really important. If you're already living with your dog and your dog's trying to go after your cat, I highly recommend that you invest in e-collar training, so that your cat doesn't die. Aggression in puppies. Kind of talked about that earlier. Okay, how to keep my dog neutral. I'm assuming that means neutral around other dogs. I don't know what the prior experience is with your dog with other dogs, or like what they're doing around other dogs, but I would start with 8 feet minimum distance from other dogs and just practice hanging out around them, not doing anything around them, not doing anything with them, just observing them without participating or interacting with. That's how I would start. I have a lot of clients that come to me with dog reactivity, and the dog is chaotic in public, can't be around other dogs. And when I ask, like, what have you done? They'll give me a whole rap sheet of everything that they've done. We've gone to dog parks, we go out with our doggy friends, we go out with our neighbors, we're going over for puppy play dates, we have puppies come over. You're doing too much. You're making the problem worse. You want to stop that. Less is more, slowly over time, and you want to go for a calm coexistence before you go for an actual interaction. Ooh, this one is good. I am currently working on this as its own little project because there's so many different case studies I've worked with separation anxiety. And I have asked you all how you'd like that information received, and you'd like case studies. So me being me, I've gone quite into it and pulled up all the studies and the research and everything that I have from any case that I've worked with separation anxiety. And it is pretty fascinating, and it's multifaceted because it's not all the same, and it's different depending on the dog. But simply here it says separation anxiety. What is it and how does it manifest, and what's the human's role in it? The human plays a huge role when it comes to separation anxiety. If there's anything that I've seen, it's that people rely too much on their dog to take care of their emotional needs. I'm going to say that again. People rely too much on their dogs to take care of their emotional needs. Now, if we look at like a pendulum, which you can't see my arms out, but we're going way to one side. Not all dogs are equipped to be therapy dogs. There's this emotional support dog or emotional dog certificate that's gone around. It unfortunately gives therapy dogs a really bad name because those dogs just need to sign up and get a certificate, and then people are bringing the dogs over into areas that technically they shouldn't be, and they're not equipped to be there. Whereas a therapy dog, a highly trained, respected therapy dog, has gone through extensive training, and that is thousands and thousands of dollars. And that dog is suited to the individual that they are supporting, and they're trained to support the specific symptoms of that individual to support them. So, two different things. It can manifest in a variety of ways. But ultimately, when it comes to just your common pet dog owner, it's because the owner has relied too much on the dog to take care of their needs without taking care of their own emotional needs. So it's like emotionally dumping onto their dog, and their dog is not equipped, and the dog crumbles. And if you think about it, that's an extreme responsibility. It's a really heavy burden on many dogs that didn't come here to do that job, and they're not equipped to do that job. So they just buckle. They buckle when their owner leaves. They buckle when the owner leaves their site. They have no form of self-esteem or very low self-esteem, and they're too codependent. And that's where the human instills codependency with their dog without teaching their dog how to navigate our own human world, what is expected of them, giving them a purpose, giving them a job, giving them responsibility. The responsibilities and jobs that the humans are giving them is to support their own emotional needs, and that is not what the dog can do. Behavior wise, temperament wise, genetic wise, just might not be the dogs to do that. So that's one example. Physiologically, when I look at this through that lens, I'm seeing a very over-aroused, overstimulated dog that doesn't know how to regulate its own energy and has in past been soothed physically with touch. And that creates its own little OCD dependency of the dog experiences arousal and needs the human touch in order to soothe. So teaching the dog how to self-soothe and regulate its own nervous system can be a lot more beneficial and can help reverse and resolve the issue. But if the human is still coming in and reinforcing certain behaviors, such as getting their dog to sit or patting their dog or like, it's okay, and using human means of settling and soothing, then the behavior is just going to exacerbate and get worse. So I think that pretty much covers all of them. I'm just looking through, make sure I didn't fix how to prevent reactivity starting as a puppy. You want to teach really good boundaries. You want to do less. Socialization is a killer word because people think that means to socialize means to interact physically and interpersonally with the environment and things within it, and it does not. Healthy socialization is just to acknowledge and not participate and have a very good handle on oneself to be inhibited in times that maybe would elicit more arousal. And what I'll say is like jumping on people is a really big one. And that's a higher arousal. We have the human leaning over top of the dog, and the dog's got this pressure. And of course it's going to jump up. In addition to sometimes the owner wants the dog to jump up for enjoyment or companionship, and then other times it's not allowed, and that's just confusing to the dog. So the best thing you can do as a puppy, it would be to download our puppy guide. Start there, educate yourself, and don't screw up day one. Start with structure from day one, and structure is not a scary thing. A lot of people are scared of structure. They believe that if they instill structure, they're going to lose their freedom. But in fact, it's completely the opposite way around. You instill structure and you open yourself up to freedom, and your dog too. So that is a video for another day. Maybe go over some puppy basics, but I would absolutely start with downloading my puppy guide. Another great resource is the Canine Human Relationship Institute. has an online self-paced course that goes into puppy development and extensively into the different stages of puppy development, what their needs are and how to fulfill them, as well as understanding the different stages and the behaviors that you're seeing at certain points in their span. So I hope that this helps. Let me know, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys. If any of these questions are yours and you would like more elaborate detail on that, feel free just to send me a direct message asking that question, and I'll do another one of these reviews. All right, everyone, have a great day.